A fifth arrest has been made in relation to a shooting at a hotel car park in Dublin last year. Gary Carey died after being shot in the underground car park on the South Circular Road in Kilmainham on the 24th of June 2022. Gardaí arrested a man in his 20s this evening. He is now being questioned at a city centre Garda station. The 2 men and 2 women arrested on Monday morning all remain in custody. It's hoped a new public database will help reunite the bodies of missing people with their families. Details of when and where a body was found, what the person was wearing and what their ethnicity might be are now available online. Junior Justice Minister James Brown is encouraging anyone with information to come forward.
There's a lot of clues in some of those unidentified persons, and what we're asking family members of missing persons to maybe go online and see if any of those clues trigger any memories, and if anybody has any information on missing persons or that might be able to help identify these remains, I would ask them to contact the Garda Síochána.
And the Education Minister says she hopes and expects the Leaving Cert results will be released in August. With just 3 weeks to go until the state exams begin, thousands of sixth years are in the dark as to when they'll receive their grades. Last year's results were delayed until the 2nd of September. Minister Norma Foley says she hopes the results date will be announced in the coming weeks.
I would be hopeful that it would be in the next short while, so hopefully prior to the exams, but I'm going to be very honest, that it's not within my gift, it is within the gift of the State Examinations Commission.
And that's your news for now.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Fancy Wimbledon tennis? Watch it live with Ryanair's low-fare flights to Luton, Gatwick or Stansted.
Staying mainly dry and clear tonight with lows of 2 to 6 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
Now then, cash machine's been reloaded. The new number is €30,201.79. Text play to 57557. Get your entry in by 3 o'clock tomorrow. And if your phone rings, answer within 5 rings. The exact amount in your own cents and the cash is yours. So the new amount again, €30,201.79. Over 18s only. Text costs €2.50. And you are playing across the Go Loud network of stations. Terms and conditions are on newstalk.com.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. All the football you love in one place. Across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
This is News Talk.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Oh.
Welcome along. So the football is continuing. 47 minutes on the clock. They are underway second half at San Siro. It remains 0-0 on the night, and so Inter are 2-0 to the good against AC Milan. Meanwhile, Championship playoff, Sunderland went in against Luton Town 2-1 up. However, Luton are 2-0 up on the night, 3-2 up on aggregate against Sunderland. Gavin Cooney, the 42, is with us. Hello.
How are you, Joe? You alright?
They won't like that up around Sunderland way.
No, absolutely. We're getting closer now to the prospect of, isn't it Kenilworth Road? Isn't that Luton's home ground? That being a Premier League venue next year, which is delightfully ramshackle.
Surprised you're here, Gav. I thought you might be over in Rochester, New York for the second golfing major of the year.
I think the budget went on the Masters this year, I have to say. Yeah, we could just fill this football hour with golf talk, but I suppose we better not, given what's over the door, etc. No, not there. Following on TV like the rest of you
plebs.
Schmucks.
Yeah. This being the week, of course, where Arsenal's title challenge formally ended. To quote Martin Odegaard, it feels like there is no hope.
Yeah, and I don't know if is that in relation just to this weekend or a whole general feeling of despair.
Yeah, I'm misrepresenting Martin. He was just talking about their title challenge, but it's such a great headline. I decided to misrepresent him all the same.
It's a great line because it sums up the kind of despair that is involved in chasing down this Man City team. I even feel like this Milan derby is hectic and it's frantic. But there is a certain futility around it all, just knowing that the winner of the second semi-final, which is likely to be Manchester City, just so much better than either of these sides, and they'll probably get pumped in the final.
Well, I do think now City might want to sit down and strategise about how they handle the next few weeks. So all things being equal...
This is dangerous stuff now for let loose Pep's brain across unfamiliar terrain.
If they want... And let's assume they do the business tomorrow for a second. They may need to think about pulling up the handbrake a touch. So don't beat Inter by 5. Beat them by 2. Don't win the league by 10 if Arsenal implode here. Just win it by 3. And let's not stuff United 4-0. Let's just win 1-0 and play keep ball. If we pummel Milan and United and just win the league at a canter, then I mean, all that like pesky journalists like you will be talking about are the 115 charges and this era of dominance. Like there's a degree of let's break a sweat here as we win this treble towards the end.
Yeah, restore some dignity into the victory by making it narrow and a close fought thing. Yeah, it's an interesting take.
That's generous, but go on.
I am amazed by the amnesia around it all. There's no point talking about this for too long because I know people don't really want to hear about the...
But sorry, that is the reason for the amnesia, is that there is a presumed boredom on the part of the audience on your part.
But like, you can't... Yeah, I know I just said it, but you can't... It's just like... I feel it should have been mentioned at some point over the last couple of days, given that City have now effectively won the league. Like Monday Night Football, the best football show.
You're talking about the charges, we should say.
Yeah, about the 115 charges. Look, I mean, they're contesting their innocence as they've every right to do, and you know, whenever the process goes through, they may well be cleared. But at the moment, there is an asterisk beside all of this.
Surely.
There is uncertainty around it, and the fact that it hasn't been referred to at all since, you know, Martin Tyler talking about the depth of the Premier League, that it's not a one-team league. City are about to win their 5th title in 6 years. And you know, Monday Night Football, the best football show that I think maybe has ever been put on television, talking yet last night about how City are a special team. And of course they are, they're incredible. But this is relevant to the whole conversation, and it seems to be a specific football thing or Premier League thing. Like if someone won a string of Tour de France victories and was then accused by the Tour de France of having lied and potentially breaking the rules.
Imagine that scenario.
And if that cyclist then went on to win the next Tour de France, I think people wouldn't exactly be hailing that victory in a without any caveats, or in a totally uncomplicated way. So I'm amazed.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Anyway.
You're totally right. Do you want to lay off Martin Tyler? Like...
Oh, go on. Yeah, sorry. Martin Tyler's been getting it from... I thought that was... I have to say, I thought it was very unfair for Martin Keown to accuse Tyler of bias against Arsenal. I think Tyler is not... He's had an incredibly long career. He's also the hardest working man in show business.
Yeah.
I mean...
He's a bit keen.
I mean, he's the voice of football on Sky Sports. So he is the voice of the Premier League. I think he probably will always have that title. But he'll pop up everywhere. You know, obviously they don't have the rights to the Champions League. Apparently, I've spoken to Will outside. Like, if you can watch the Champions League on Live Score, and Tyler's the commentator.
No,
it's just incredible. But I thought that was very unfair. I think Tyler is he doesn't get as excited as he used to.
I like that about him.
Yeah,
I think I tend to be more in a minority on that front, as your guttural sound indicated there. But I do like that he doesn't react as if he's, you know, seeing a goal for the first time in his life at every turn.
Yeah, but he does seem like there are now goals going in where it sounds like he's just stifling a yawn as he's describing them. Look, he has been...
He lets the pictures do the work.
Yeah, I suppose. He has been the best commentator. No, the best commentator... Well, this is all personal view. Best commentator I've ever heard is George Hamilton. I think that will always be...
We were blessed, weren't we? Just how good he was.
Yeah. It's just like incredible ability to find the right words for the right moment. I'm obviously incredibly jealous of that.
He's still not on my television enough these days.
No, not at all. I don't really know what's happening there. No. I don't think he did the World Cup final either.
Apparently he's on GA Go. Another conversation.
Imagine. He just always found the right words for the right moment, and
imagine the pressure,
scripted.
Like on a younger man, as Dave O'Leary's taking the penalty, you better nail this.
Yeah, and like I don't think anyone has ever, if you're looking at television viewing audience as a percentage of, I don't think anyone has ever broadcasted that percentage of a country's population of the penalty shootout in Italia 90, because it was on RTE2, the news was on RTE1, and it cut live to the penalty shootout in Italy, and I don't think there were any other channels at the time. So literally 100% of the people watching television in Ireland that day, which was most of the people in the country, were listening to Hamilton. But you know, he is I think he's the best I've ever heard. But I've always liked Tyler a lot. Just I feel like I think, you know, then when his voice and the cadence of his voice would rise to meet the moment, it would be all the more effective for that, because he keeps it relatively lower key and lower tone.
He leaves himself somewhere to go.
Prior to that, And now he sounded croaky, I have to say, at the weekend. So I don't, maybe he wasn't 100% fit, as it were.
Listen to his podcast with Gary Neville afterwards, and his voice sounded gone.
Yeah. And it wasn't from overly exerting his vocal cords during Arsenal Brighton.
No. Maybe stop, taking League Two matches on a Tuesday, Martin.
It's incredible. Like the hardest working man. He's also a coach. He's I think he's got badges. He's coached at, is it Kingstonians at non-league level or something like that?
Yeah.
He has been an assistant manager there or something.
Back to your original point. Sorry, that was a bit of a diversion. I agree with you on the 115 charges. And actually, I've listened to quite a few different podcasts. Certainly The Guardian mentioned it, and I think The Athletic, one or two others. Somebody made the point, shouldn't we be mentioning the unprecedented charges a bit more about City? So I think it's in the ether, but I think the reason it's not coming up is it doesn't lead to a great conversation.
See, it's not definitive. See, football, so there's this thing of sport is a metaphor for life, and it's not really. It's kind of a theatre or a version of life, but there's a resolution at the end. There's always the result, and then over a longer period of time, there's the season, the 38 games, and then luck will even itself out over a season, and ultimately the best team will be crowned. But there's not that definitive. If you're going to, talk about the charges and everything, there's actually not a definitiveness about this title triumph now for City, because you wonder, well, what if that case goes against them down the line? And look, it may not. They maintain their innocence, as they have every right to do, and every right to fight their case. But there's just that lack of definition and decisiveness around it makes it really hard, because that's the these are, when City win the league, that's when the media kicks into gear and talks about how brilliant they are and what they've done well, and hail the obvious geniuses from the coach to the striker to everyone in between. But it's too hard to do. It's easier just to say, well, Arsenal bottled it. That's at least that's a kind of a definitive conversation.
Yeah.
Wish they didn't. But
well, it is tricky, the City thing, because I suspect most people have a sense of how they feel about the 115 charges, completely unprecedented, and the validity of them. City will defend themselves, but I think people look on and say, well, something about this feels a bit obvious as well. They've just spent a lot of money, and maybe they're better at financial manoeuvring than others, but
and then,
it is an asterisk.
To make
no doubt.
The money has obviously made a difference. You get in these. Maybe I'm paying too much attention to my Twitter mentions after talking about this at the weekend. People talking about Pep makes a difference. Well, of course he does, but he's not working for free. And then squad depth is what makes a difference over a league season. Arsenal lost Saliba and couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
City can rest De Bruyne and Grealish for a weekend game against Everton in the run-in. That's what makes the difference. And
it was quite something to see plucky old Mahrez and Foden thrown in.
These guys, they're incredible players. Gundogan, if he does leave on a free transfer at the end of the year, will be a linchpin of whatever team he walks into.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
And he only really seems to be wheeled out for Man City in April when they need to win the league. Yeah. And he's an incredible player and always delivers for them. So.
And the main charge against Arsenal is squad depth, so it's absolutely looming large in my thinking. And now I have to say, I love watching the City team more than I've watched City teams of recent years, but I agree with you. It is it's not being talked about enough, but then, I don't know, akin to issues you may have with Newcastle ownership. Do you just have a ticker tape going along at all times?
I know there's fatigue around it. I respect that view, and you don't have to, every time you talk about Man City, you don't have to bring them up. I don't think that's a credible way of going around it. But when they win the thing, and when you're talking about how brilliant they are in the context of the full season, these charges were brought up during the season, I mean, I feel like that's an important piece of context that's missing. But there's just something very unsatisfying that we've sat down for a year. It's basically that's a long old box set that we've watched of this year's Premier League season. And what are we going to do? Cut the black? We need some kind of finale and definitive end to it. But in real life, we don't have one yet.
I do think that when they win the league at a canter and potentially win a Champions League final and an FA Cup final convincingly, there will be an explosion again of, hang on.
Yeah, no, I think there will be.
The logical question will be, well, how have they just won a treble so brilliantly and with such domination? Oh, hang on. There are 115 charges against them, not brought for the crack either. Speaking of winning the treble in convincing fashion as opposed to very dramatic fashion in 1999, Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher were on Monday Night Football last night doing their thing, and they were picking combined 11s, which, you know, it's just good TV.
Yeah.
It just... I didn't see this because I wasn't watching last night. I was in here. But when I heard they did this, I thought, I must go and check that out. So I've a clip or two, and then you can fill us in on the general tone of the conversation. So here they are, debating Manchester United 99 versus 2023 Manchester City on Monday Night Football. And so here, for instance, we have Gary Neville explaining why he will not budge on the midfield four of Beckham, Keane, Scholes and Giggs.
That midfield, by the way, Beckham, Scholes, Keane and Giggs, I'm not even entertaining from anybody. That's the greatest midfield that's ever played football in this country, bar none. There isn't anybody can ever, honestly, that there's no one comes close when it comes to a midfield quartet like that. They had absolutely everything. And that, to me, I have to say, is my selection.
Yeah.
I like how truculent he is around that.
Part of me sort of agrees. There was a moment as well where in Carragher's team he has Grealish in instead of Giggs, and he quoted the fact that Grealish has maybe scored 5 goals and 4 assists, and Giggs had a measly 3 goals and 2 assists. And, you know, Neville is a master of like a facial expression which says you're a moron. Now, Jamie Redknapp reacts to that by saying, look at me when I'm talking to you. Everyone else lets it slide. But then when it came to Gundogan instead of Scholes, which was Carragher's selection, he said, oh, but like Scholes was like, he wasn't even first choice a lot of the time, and, you know, just whatever. And Neville said, well, if we're going by stats, Gundogan scored X, Y and Z. It wasn't particularly impressive. And he said, Scholes has 18 goals and assists to his name, and he played 55 games. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
To which Carragher, who's not usually on the back foot when it comes to stats, was like, I seem to remember against Inter, didn't come off the bench against Juve. So
I did see Paul Howard made the point on Twitter today that assists didn't exist in 1999, which is actually would have been as good a rebuttal as Carragher could have delivered.
David Beckham had 24 of them.
24 assists, yeah.
It was outrageous.
Yeah, and that was...
He's much maligned, Beckham.
That was after the 98, that awful treatment that was meted out to him.
Yeah, the effigy. And they played West Ham early in the season. The abuse was off the charts. Yeah. But look, there are a lot of flaws to Beckham's like general character now, and it just kind of gives me the ick, to use the technical term these days. But that season, he was absolutely sensational. I won't hear otherwise. It's not true to say otherwise. It might be fashionable. It's not true. Yeah,
that was... So unfortunately, I'm too young to remember this amazing 99 season.
He was so good.
I read the Matt Dickinson book last year and just absolutely loved it. One of my favourite sports books of last year. And Beckham actually shines through as one of the best, one of the best players of the year. And I was surprised the extent to which I was drawn to his storyline throughout that year of kind of redemptive arc from 98. Now, he did grant a couple of interviews to the author, which always helps with playing up his angle of things, whereas Keane didn't go to him.
It was a big part of the year. It was that bad that people were saying, well, he'd leave England, you know, this was kind of the sense.
But the whole run-in then, like, that must have been like the stuff of kind of epic.
It was so good.
Yeah.
There's never been a year like it. Now, I was about to be 14, so I was a 13, 14-year-old across that season. Which was like, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, I was so obsessed that, you know, I was doing my homework, but listening to long wave commentary on 5 Live, crackling and, like, you know, holding my radio up in the corner of the room to get better signal. Amazing. Like that level of kind of obsessiveness with it. But it was like just epic. And there was a Liverpool FA Cup game where they came back from the dead. And from that point on, every match they were involved in just seemed to have so much drama. Like nothing was easy about it. They were always liable to mess up, and yet they kept finding ways to do it.
Yeah. Well, Neville was talking about that run in April. Was it Juventus, Arsenal, Juventus?
Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't quite the run of games, but there was a game against Sheffield Wednesday thrown in there as well. Yeah. But they had, and Neville made the point that Juventus were the best team in Europe at the time. Arsenal were, he didn't say the best team in England because that was Man United, but they were the next best team, and they actually were champions, I suppose, from the season before. So it must have been just this incredible sprawling epic that went on for months and months.
Unbelievable. I remember listening to the Giggs goal from the halfway line on long wave crackling radio, and you know, Dad, did you hear this? So it's just those kind of moments, and then of course the final is the final. So it's very hard to it's hard to compare
them, but there's something I don't want to. There'll be Man City fans kind of throwing their long wave radios out the window now at the moment listening to this, but that same sense of that same kind of quixotic sense is not here at all. This is just
dead by comparison.
This is just like the machine just eating up the next bit of ground that it's in front of it, and it's. Ultimately, if they do this treble, which I think they probably will, it's obviously an incredible achievement. Asterisk, 115 charges, asterisk. But it's one to be admired rather than one to be enthralled by. And I get the sense the United one was one. And I found it, believe it or not, quite endearing how proud Neville was on TV last night of having been part of this.
Yeah.
I actually found it. I did actually really enjoy it because. They did this. They obviously did their combined 11s, but Neville at the start, his combined 11 was the United team from 1999, and he said, "Well, we've done it. When these guys go and do their treble, then we'll talk about being added into this team." And maybe it was a bit, and maybe it was a gag, but
when I heard that,
I'm not sure that it was.
No, I'm not sure. When I did hear that, I did think, well, hang on, this slot's your idea. So if you're, we didn't make you do this.
It just reminded me of Keane did a joint. Was it a joint United Liverpool 11? Carragher.
Yeah.
And it was just like Sadio Mane, and Keane was just like, well, Kanchelskis, and not for turning at all. So,
the other thing that's kind of hard to get across from that decade, the 90s. So it was the holy grail, obviously, for Ferguson, and the 90s were a slow and steady build up to it, and it was the ultimate culmination because it was because at that stage. I was too young to know about the ban, and I almost has an English team ever won in Europe? Because it just felt so impossible against these great Italian sides, and Dortmund won in '97, and it just seemed like, God, an English side not going to win Europe. Whereas now, it's like, well, we are the Super League. Of course, we're going to win in Europe. So
totally.
There's no sense of what an achievement. Yeah. Whereas in '99 to win the European Cup felt like what an achievement. Yeah. Like Jonathan Wilson was on a while back and he was talking, and I remember the game as well. It was a few years prior to '99 when United played Porto in a quarter-final, and all the build-up was Porto. They're really good. And United beat them 4-0, and it was like, oh my God, United beat Porto 4-0. Well, nowadays, I mean, if you don't put 10 on Leipzig, you're kind of had a bad day at the office.
Oh, well, I mean, look, the converse to all this, that if City don't win the Champions League in Guardiola's time, he'll be laughed out of town, There'll be the old bowl throw. It will be, will make a comeback. So that has definitely dampened the whole thing. But it's a wider conversation as to the concentration of wealth and talent in the Premier League has stripped so much of the game bare. It's like, from an Irish point of view, it's kind of ruined our player development, which is another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sense of wonder, that sense of being able to be surprised. I think one of the things about Napoli is that Kvaratskhelia came from absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
In a sense, because he was in Russia and left because of the war. But there's this, oh my God, this fully formed genius that we hadn't heard of before. That hasn't happened in years.
No.
I think that was one of the kind of seductive things about the Napoli story. Whereas, even back in the 90s and early 2000s, even as late as the early 2000s, this was kind of, you tune into the Champions League to hear about the Kvaratskhelia of the world.
Yes. Jamie Carragher's combined team, if you're interested, listener. Schmeichel got the nod in goal. I think that's an interesting one. Ederson, ball at his feet. I know Schmeichel has this totemic kind of presence, but he got the nod. Kyle Walker got the nod at right back.
Yeah.
He kept his head down during that part. I just think his season better than Carragher's season.
Carragher then at the end, by the way, did do a real kind of lovey-dovey thing. It was just like, you know what? I'll put Gary in.
Keep it.
Even though Walker, miles better than Neville. In fairness, it's not to have the same debate on this show with you, Joe. It's not a conversation.
Neville was very good. A better defender than Walker. Well, maybe not.
I really think
Walker the other night was good.
When Southgate needed a man marker for
I take that.
Mbappe, and he couldn't turn to Seamus Coleman like he had to turn to Kyle Walker.
Find it hard to split them. And I wouldn't have a problem there. Stam was in both their teams. So Stam was in Carragher's. He went for Diaz instead of Ronnie Johnson, in fairness. You can live with that. Dennis Irwin in both their teams. Beckham was in both their teams. Roy Keane was in both their teams. Carragher went for Gundogan over Scholes. That is a disgrace. Grealish over Giggs. Grealish over Giggs. And he had De Bruyne. See, this was the crafty thing. Me and Kenny Cunningham did this the other week, and I insisted that it has to be a good old-fashioned 4-4-2. So, like, it was De Bruyne go in your midfield, but he cheated a touch. He had De Bruyne in behind Haaland. So, no York and no Cole. Dwight York that year. You've never seen anything like it.
Really, yeah, because Neville Neville made the argument for Yorkie, and he might have said Coley.
There's a strong argument for York to be in there somehow that year.
Rather than De Bruyne and Haaland.
Well, obviously
I'm deferring to your...
No, like...
You're the man you've got the authority and credibility.
No one's in ahead of Haaland. And, okay, if I'm shifting De Bruyne back to midfield, then don't ask me how I'm doing that.
But if you're going to shift De Bruyne back, then it's either Scholes or Keane that have to go.
I'm not doing that either. Gary Neville.
Keane do a job at centre half. This team will dominate the ball.
Not the 98-99 Roy Keane is a midfielder. He is box to box. Some of the goals Keane scored in 98-99. My goodness. Gary Neville's combined team, when he eventually got round to do it. Schmeichel in goal. He put himself in the end at right back. Felt he had a better game understanding than Kyle Walker.
The graphic initially had question mark. He was initially going to leave it blank as a kind of a flourish of magnanimity from Gary Neville. But yeah, no, he did. He did eventually. I'll put myself in.
Stam in. He put Diaz in. He had Irwin in. His midfield was Beckham, Keane, Scholes, Giggs. No conversation to be had. And De Bruyne and Haaland. And he didn't feel good about that, but you sort of have to do it.
Yeah, but then the thing about City, like up until this season, the star is Guardiola. Now they're more interesting because the star is now Haaland. But when you're picking even a team of the season, I tried to pick a team of the season a few days ago just because I had nothing else to do. I looked at it and was just like, there's actually not that many City players there. I better reverse engineer this, considering that they are the dominant side.
Why do you think that is?
Having more impressive. I think because there's a certain expectation management to it. I was just like, these guys have been at such a high level for so long, it doesn't catch the eye anymore. Whereas Arsenal, like Zinchenko looks so much more interesting and impressive in the Arsenal team rather than the City team.
Yeah.
I thought Odegaard had to be in. I thought Saka had to be in. I thought Rashford probably had to be in because he was so good for you. And he basically carried United on his back throughout the middle part of the season. But I think that's just what we're used to. That the City guys are, these guys are always, it's the Dennis Irwin principle that he's underrated because he was always, the Ferguson line is just like he was always 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10.
Yeah. Just as a final quick clip, the impossible question, and it is an impossible question. So if they were to play each other in a hypothetical match, 99 United versus 23 City, who would win?
Who do you think would win in a game?
Well, if it was a neutral venue, what how would that work out?
Do you know what I would say is that City's football you can't deny, but then obviously we played against good teams that that we could play football. I think that my view would be that we'd find a way somehow with the character in the team. I think we have maybe better options off the bench to come on potentially and score goals up front with the 4 strikers. City have got Haaland, but then behind that, they maybe don't need anyone behind that, but they've got Alvarez, which is he's a good player, fantastic player, but I think we have better strikers, so I think we'd find a way.
When you said you'd find a way, and I get obviously I played against that team, and that was the great thing about how many times they came back. He came back against us in an FA Cup game, 2 goals in the last minute. You did that consistently through the season. When you're saying you'd find a way, we're still talking about Pep Guardiola. In terms of, don't you think he'd find a way? Because I think most United fans would say, even though we're talking about the treble team, the 2008 team, 7, 8, 9 team was maybe even like a level above. I don't know if I'm sure you get what I'm saying is that his Barcelona team is better than the Man City team, but he found a way to beat the best Manchester United. Do you think he'd be thinking, well, I could find a way as well?
100%. I mean, Pep Guardiola would, I think, against Alex Ferguson in the prime would be an absolute unbelievable contest. What I would say is that in 2008 we found a way to beat Barcelona. That was against Frank Rijkaard. But then Pep Guardiola had the better of us twice at Wembley, 2009 and 11. What I would say is that Barcelona team that Pep had in that period was the greatest football team I've ever seen. So that's take our treble team into the consideration and everything. They were the greatest football team I've ever seen, and Messi was something out of this world. So for me, with that team that he had, he could do anything he wanted to, Pep. What he's since found, though, at Bayern Munich and at Manchester City, is that he's lost games against Spurs, against Real Madrid, against other teams that you would think that he would have beaten. Chelsea in the final, Pep Guardiola's lost to. So I think that from my point of view, what we've got to judge Pep on in respect of this team is the team he's got now and the struggles he's had in the last few years to win the Champions League. We had struggles at times to win the Champions League as well, so I don't think we should compare Pep in that period at Barcelona, because that was just an exceptional team that I don't think ever been matched.
It's an impossible question, obviously.
Is it?
But United 99 would find a way.
I don't. I really disagree with you. I think that
they get the absolute snot kicked out of them for the first hour.
Yeah,
they would be blinded
how many goals?
You see, they'd be like they'd hang on. They'd Real Madrid them, and there'd be an array of sophistication here that they'd never seen. They'd be looking around each other like this is like something from Space Jam. They'd be like, "What is this?" They're passing. They're doing all this, but then slowly but surely, like a 60-minute PhD, they would download all the array of angles in front of them, and they'd start talking to each other
and pull a couple of late goals back for a 6-2 defeat.
Honestly, I think they'd find a way to do anything in that bunch in that mood that year.
Maybe. I think that's... I know this is an absurd and fictitious argument, but if we're going to take it on its merits, I think you're falling prone to magical thinking. I think City would have had, obviously, a greater tactical sophistication. They have a better striker. I mean, if this City team played that United team on the tactical sophistication of the day and of those tactics of the day, I actually think City have the better players to beat United at that game, to be quite honest. With De Bruyne,
I prefer to see Jaap Stam more on him than Ronnie. I'll give you that.
City had battered them.
Yeah, it's probably my heart talking. Yeah, you're 14 forever in a way.
Of slightly more relevance than 1999 is the fact that Inter Milan are headed for this year's Champions League final.
Yes, 3-0 on aggregate, 1-0 on the night. I got to go. Clock is getting away from us. Our football show coverage is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. Back in 1 sec.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
This is News Talk. The Hard Shoulder with Kieran Cuddihy.
The point of AI is that it's not a generic email to 100 people. It's 100 different emails. If you've got 1 million customers, they'll get 1 million different versions of the email. No two will be alike. They'll be like snowflakes.
But if you haven't checked them and some of them are gobbledygook and they just confuse your customers and result in more queries, have you actually